Good afternoon, everybody. Today, this video is going to cover several of the chapters that we're going to cover in this evening's class. Chapter 6, Public Opinion, Chapter 7, Political Participation, and Chapter 8, The Media. So in this video, I'm going to provide you with a little bit more explanation and some supplementary information so that we have time in class to focus on a couple of activities and have a little bit more discussion. We'll also have our debate in today's class, so be prepared for that. So focusing on chapter 6 to begin, one of the key segments of this chapter is talking about political socialization, and that is the process by which individuals learn about the political system. So thinking about public opinion, when you hear commentators talk about public opinion polls, what they're talking about is surveys that have been done to collect the personal opinions of adults in this country. And usually they're focusing on not only on political issues, but also social, economic, any issues that could be of concern to government officials. So when you ask, how do we figure out what we think about political issues? How do we come up with our opinions? The answer to that is political socialization. So, like I said, this is a process where new members of the political system become oriented and find out what the standards are, what are the beliefs, what are the values of our political system. And in order to do that, there are several agents of political socialization. So, we're going to cover family, school, religious institutions, peers, and media. Those are 5 key agents of political socialization. As we cover these agents, keep in mind what you think about your particular experience, because that's something that we'll be talking about in class. So starting with family, if you have a politically active family, then you're more likely to be a politically active individual yourself. And those similarities, though, what opinions your family members have, whether they're active on a liberal or a conservative side, your similarity to your family members might diminish over time, but you are more likely to be politically active if you were raised in a household where individuals were active also. In terms of schools, they are considered to be self-contained political systems, and students learn about democracy in school. They learn sometimes schools are more or less democratic, so some schools might focus more on rules and compliance and keeping students in line, and this can actually hinder political participation when individuals are able to vote because they haven't experienced a more democratic kind of system of education. Other schools focus more on student engagement and getting students getting students to participate in the decision-making processes. These kinds of schools increase the students' familiarity with democracy. They're already used to being able to vote and express their opinions, and they see opportunities to, exert power even as students, and so they are more ready, and more prepared to participate in self-governance. The next agent of political socialization is religious institutions. And again, individuals who are active with a religious institution are more likely to be politically active outside of that institution. Often, religious institutions are training grounds for political leadership. There are opportunities within the organization to take a leadership position, to help your church, or to help in whatever capacity your organization needs. And so individuals kind of get used to taking on those leadership positions, and then they are more willing and ready to jump into political leadership. It's important to note that when you have the head of a religious institution who's more authoritative, who requires more of an absolute belief in the religion as a source of truth, then the participants are more likely to have an absolute acceptance and support for whatever the political stance is of their religious leaders. So it's kind of like if you see your religious leader as the leader, then whatever their political stance is, then that's what your political stance is. And it's not as strong if the religious leader is not as authoritative. So something to keep in mind. The fourth agent of political socialization is peers, and that includes friends, colleagues, co-workers. And this is important because discussions among your friends and colleagues, it has a great influence on voters' decisions. Young adulthood is really an interesting area because that's where the peer influence becomes stronger than the family influence. So that's something that we'll talk about a little bit in class. And then the fifth agent of political socialization is the media. So we have talked a bit about traditional media versus new media, but both of these forms give individuals facts and opinions that are related to political issues. So that's how the media helps individuals learn about the political system. There's the influence of newspapers and magazines. Usually, individuals who turn to newspapers and magazines more often because they contain more facts than TV news. So the consumers are more politically informed. It's just easier to load up a newspaper article with facts and figures, and then when you read that information becomes internalized a little bit easier. Individuals who rely more on television for their news, television gives them a sense of how important a political issue is. So if they're relying on television for their news, if they're seeing a story over and over and over again, it could be the same story. And so that makes them think that this must be the most important issue because I'm seeing it more and more. So it's not necessarily better or worse, but it's something to think about because the different forms of media can lead individuals to be informed in different ways. So, moving into the latter part of chapter six, measuring public opinion. Most public opinion is measured through surveys because the pollsters want large numbers of individuals. They want to be able to speak to large segments of the population, and so they have to be able to talk to them and put the information into quantitative form. Quantitative means referring to numbers, and so that's why the surveys are used most often to collect public opinion. Defining, or when you think about public opinion, we're just covering this very briefly, but in terms of your team projects, it's important to know where to find reputable political polls. So, Gallup Poll, Pew Research Center, and a few others are listed here for you to use as resources as you look for surveys that speak to your team topic. And then finally, talking a bit about political ideology. Ideology is just a collection of ideas. If you're talking about your political ideology, then usually you're talking about your ideas, which are focused on a couple of factors. First, the best form of government. So your ideology has to do with whether you think democracy or autocracy or monarchy or other forms of government. That is a part of what your political ideology is, what your opinion is. What's the best form of government? And also, part of your ideology is going to focus on what's the best economic system, whether it's capitalism, socialism, or other forms. So, thinking about liberal versus conservative political ideology, you all have probably heard those terms before. These are very general definitions because an individual's ideology is not necessarily set in stone. So, the liberal political ideology generally believes that the role of government should be to guarantee no one's in need, and the policies are generally designed to allow government to solve problems. And that's very general because every single policy that's labeled as liberal isn't necessarily focused on keeping people out of need or using the government to solve problems. However, generally speaking, if a policy is considered to be liberal, there's probably going to be a significant role for government in terms of addressing whatever the social issue is. And the social issue or the political issue is going to be framed as something that is detrimental, to citizens, creating citizen suffering, that kind of thing. And so the policy is needed to pull people out of need. The conservative political ideology generally is going to be based around this belief that government should be the role of government is to provide people with the freedom necessary to pursue their own goals. So rather than stepping in to help, the role of government should be to kind of create a space where people can pursue their own goals unencumbered. And policies that are labeled as conservative often might seek to preserve the institutions the way they are, hence the term conservative. The base is conserve. So keep things the way they are, emphasizing stability and continuity. Now, a reactionary would be a more extreme conservative who not only opposes the current conditions, they want a return to things the way they were. So it's important to keep those, just to have an understanding of those terms so that you're informed, but not to hold on to them too tightly, because it is possible there are many people who have a mix of liberal and conservative political ideologies. And so it's relatively rare when individuals are just strictly liberal or strictly conservative all the way across the board. So we don't want to use them to stereotype or label people, but they're important terms to know. And then finally, when you think about the political spectrum, this is just a system of classifying political positions. And again, you hold this information lightly, because the terms left and right, they define opposite ends of the political spectrum, but most of the time people fall somewhere in the middle, and we can move back and forth along the spectrum. So just keep in mind, though, that liberals are usually referred to as falling on the left side of the spectrum, and conservatives are referred to as falling on the right. And then just another piece of information most of you should know: on the political map, the blue represents the Democratic Party, which leans towards the liberal. So blue usually represents Democrats, which usually lean toward the liberal, and red usually represents Republicans, which usually lean towards the conservative. So that is going to complete our video for chapter 6. I'm going to move into another video to discuss chapters 7 and 8. So those will be posted on our class website as well.